There we go.
Namaskar, welcome to another episode of Dil Se Stories. We once again have a very special guest, Sooraj Subramaniam. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Much honored. Much honored.
So, before we get started, would you mind introducing yourself to our audience, please?
Uh, I am a dance artist. That's my main profession, based in the small city of Ghent in Belgium. My heritage is Indian. My grandparents were from India, but I grew up in Malaysia. Eventually, my family moved to Australia, and through my travels, now I've ended up in Belgium. So I've been here for the past 12 years. And that's me in a nutshell.
You've traveled quite quite a lot. And my name is Dr. Parag Bharatwaj. So let's get going. Uh, you said you're a dance artist or dancer, right? So, uh, what got you interested in it?
Uh, to be completely frank, it was just something that my maternal grandmother enrolled me into. I didn't really have any choice in the matter. I was 6 years old, my sister was 4, and my grandmother took us to the local temple where there was a dance teacher, and she said, "This is what you're going to do on your weekends." So we did that for just nearly all my childhood, and I suppose the interest developed gradually, but at the initial stages, I didn't have any burning desire to dance. It was just something that we did on the weekends.
So this was in Malaysia.
This was in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, yes.
Great. And what dance form did you learn?
So I started with Bharatnatyam. There was a teacher from India. She was related to the Travancore sisters of India, and she ran the Padmini Kalalayam, which was she ran it out of the temple hall in Malaysia. And so I did Bharatanatyam there for 3 years, and then the teacher, she eventually had to leave the country, and she migrated, if I remember, to South Africa. And so then we moved to Ramli Ibrahim's Sutra Dance Company, as it was called, and then Dance Theatre, and now it's known as the Sutra Foundation.
Sounds like it's growing,
Yeah,
right?
it's quite a it's I think it's the premier institution for Indian classical dance in Malaysia. Ramliji was himself was a trained ballet and contemporary dancer in the 70s, and he trained in Australia. When he came back to Malaysia, he also traveled to India and trained there. And so when he came back to Malaysia in the late 70s, early 80s, began the Indian dance school for Indian dance. So that's how there's a whole generation of dancers who trained under him, who've traveled sort of internationally since then.
Great. So you mentioned that initially you were asked to do this on the weekends, and then at some point you really started getting interested in it.
Yeah.
Do you remember when and how that transition took place?
Again, I think this was gradual. There was no one specific incident. The seeds for kind of a deep interest in dance grew during my time at Sutra. We had a sort of quite an immersive dance learning experience because Ramliji didn't only present dance. Artists from many different backgrounds worked there, theater, music, many different genres of dance and music. So we were exposed to all these things, even though we only did Indian classical dance. We were exposed to all these different things. So there we sort of saw dance not just in its small cultural context, in relation to our heritage, but its larger sort of artistic remit. So there you sort of could see what this could do, not just for cultural identity, but for the way that you thought and the way that you related to the world, the way that you think about poetry and philosophy. And so these sorts of things really interested me. And the sort of deeper interest in dance grew during my teenage years with no kind of intention of taking this seriously, but I knew that it was a big part of my life. It wasn't until I was in my early 20s that I decided that I was going to take it professionally.
Sounds like an amazing journey.
It was not without its challenges,
Sure,
certainly. Yeah.
sure. So tell us about what are all the dance forms that you've trained in?
So at the Sutra Foundation, I trained initially in Bharatnatyam and a couple of years later started Odissi because Ramliji did both styles. He also gave us training in classical ballet and some Western contemporary dance forms, but these were mainly for conditioning of the body, to bring awareness to the way that you move, rather than to perform them as exclusive styles. So primarily we trained and performed in Bharatanatyam and Odissi with these sort of ancillary styles informing how the body moved. When I moved to Australia, I continued training in classical ballet and eventually undertook an advanced diploma in ballet and contemporary dance. And that's sort of steered the direction in which my professional career would go. So I have these sort of styles under my belt, but I call myself a Bharatanatyam and Odissi and a contemporary dancer. When I lived in London for a short while, and there I studied some Kathak as well. So I have these vocabularies at my disposal.
So I'm just curious, like when you train in ballet school, right? So as a doctor, we are given exams, right, at the end of the year. With dancers, do you have to give like a performance to a audience or to a teacher that they grade you with a minimum pass? You know, like we traditional are used to in the education system.
I don't think, I mean, outside of the institutional systems, certainly in my awareness in Indian dance training, there are no formal exams. The formal exams only come as part of institutional training. In the traditional Gurukula system, you just trained with your gurus, and that's in a similar vein. That's what I did. All of us did at our respective dance schools. You just went to your training, you did a few performances here and there. I suppose the big marker for many students of Indian dance would be the Arangetram or the Rangamanch Pravesh. I didn't do this because it was coming to a point where I was doing my final year exams at school, and we were talking about it, and they were in the planning stages, but it couldn't happen because thereafter I was going to Australia, so we just couldn't. It didn't happen, and so that never happened for me. But then I took on dancing professionally since then. When I trained in Australia, however, I went to a dance college. And there, of course, we had exams I think it was every semester that we had exams, or it might have been once a year. I don't remember exactly. But there we had exams where a panel of a jury would sit and watch you and grade you and sort of assess what you've gained, what knowledge you've gained throughout the year, and give you feedback on what you needed to improve on for the following year. So most of the exams were practical. We had a couple of sessions on dance theory. You had to write essays on various aspects of dance that interested you. But I'd say 80% of what we did was practical. They weren't, I mean, I'd be hard pressed to compare them to medical exams, but yes, we did have assessments, call it that way. That certainly allowed you to put milestones in your progress.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's a bit more subjective than, in medicine, you have concrete answers, right? It's either this or that. And
yes.
So very interesting. So with all the exposure that you've had, what in your view makes dancing or dance so unique?
Well, there's two aspects to it. I think certainly there's dance as a movement form, and I think all of us have access to that. We can all kind of move and find joy in movement, and so there's that aspect. Then there's the artistic side to it, where you're thinking about movement poetically, and then you decide whether you want to tell stories or do impressionistic movement, or there's so many avenues, so many genres in which dance can go that allow you to think creatively. It sort of feeds an artistic need to move. I suppose from there, that is really the base from which stems all kinds of other avenues for dance. I suppose there's the religious, there's the community building aspects of dance. Then, of course, we have the industry of performance, which is, falls under the umbrella of entertainment, for want of a better term. And I think they all require slightly different, brain spaces. You've got to think about them all slightly differently, even though there's lots of overlaps. The artistic part is easier to look after. It's harder in a sense because, like you say, it's subjective and there are no concrete answers. So you've got to find the answers within, and that's why you rely on your friends and your mentors and your gurus to kind of help you develop artistic ideas. The industry, on the other hand, is a completely different beast. There are variables that are completely outside of your control. What are the market needs? Really, I mean, to shift your thinking that way sometimes can be quite painful, but it is the reality of the world. What are the current trends? Who is one of them? At the end of the day, you're providing a product that an audience wants to see, and you've got to know what the market is and how to package it and how to present it and whom to present it to. These are all different skills that you've got to cultivate. I find them all personally very, very challenging. I'd rather stay in this little bubble, this little echo chamber of working artistically. It feeds your soul. It's, there's joy within the movement. There is no judgment apart from what you think of it to be. The industry aspect is perhaps the more challenging for me. But it is a reality if one wants to pursue dance as a career. It exists within the format of an industry. So you've got to find your place within it, work to your strengths. And I suppose that's the best anyone can do.
Very well said. You sound like a very thoughtful person and deep philosopher.
I try.
Yeah, you've tried different forms of dancing. Is there something unique to the Indian form of dancing?
I can only speak from my experience, obviously, because I cannot compare all forms of dance. I think sometimes I do wonder, what if the subject matter of Indian dance hadn't been religion and philosophy? How might we have related to it? But seeing that this is the reality, that this is where it comes from, this is the tradition of the dance forms, I feel it allows for the artistic seed to be introspective on the human condition. So we're really talking about how an individual might think and feel and behave, and this is, I think, partly related to the subject matter of the material and also the formats in which the dances were presented. If you think of the theatre format, storytelling, you're relating to an audience, or whether it's a solo format, again, you're storytelling, you're narrating a particular aspect of a character's a story. It's all to do with human relationships, how a particular individual feels. So having this as the foundation allows for a lot of warmth, I think, when you examine the gamut of human emotions. And I don't know if that's unique to Indian dance, but it is certainly a salient feature of Indian dance that we examine human emotions, and the experience of doing this allows for warmth. As opposed to some other forms of dance. It might be ballet, it might be Western contemporary dance. The ways in which that they've progressed from when they were initiated allow for more abstraction in the movement. Or rather, those are the trends in which they've gone. I'd say movement as a medium. An individual artist can do whatever they want with it, but these are the sort of general trends in my personal experience. So there's greater space for abstract, personal, interpretive movement within the more contemporary forms of within the more contemporary vocabularies. And whilst there is a strong canon of stories and narratives in the Indian classical dance forms, there's a lot of personal, that you can find personal expression within those structures. And I find that quite comforting. There's really a lot is given to you. In fact, too much, I think, sometimes is given to an individual as a performer, but then there's so much space for you to find yourself within it. And I think that is what I find the strength of Indian dance to be, that you can find a really deep personal relationship to the human condition within the structures that have been provided by tradition. And then, of course, you can make it your own. But that, I think, is its strength.
Yeah, that's very interesting because, when I watch it, it seems very concrete, right? This is what you're supposed to do. But then you've said that you can infuse your own, signature within the dance form. Very interesting. Thank you.
I mean, if you take, as an analogy, if you take a piece of poetry, no two people will read it exactly the same way. The accents, the inflections, the tempo, the pacing is all going to be different. And that different readings are going to give you slightly different, even though the text is exactly the same. And you can find yourself within it. And so essentially, that's what Indian dance does. It's training you to be actors within the material that's been handed down in each person. And because a lot of the forms are solo formats, you can find your own way within it. And it's, just really rich, wonderful forms to work with.
Great. So just switching gears a bit, you started learning dance at a very young age. And, what was it like being, I wanted to recollect what was your experience as a male dancer? Because, traditionally, usually what we see in our tradition is the females.
Yeah.
I mean, there are very famous, very good male dancers, but they seem to be outnumbered by the females who choose to take up dancing. So tell us about your experience then, and how is your experience now?
I think when I started, pardon me, right when I started, because I was the only boy in the class, I used to get singled out for like Krishna roles, and I found this uncomfortable. There'd be a lot of gopis around the space, and I had to run around and steal their clothes, and in reference to some of the mythological stories, and I found this deeply uncomfortable. I didn't want to be singled out. I think more than having to perform the role, I didn't like that sort of focused attention on me. I was a very shy kid, and I didn't enjoy that. So that was the only time the fact that I was male was evident in my awareness. Moving on from there, once I started dancing at Sutra, and dance became a more, let's put it this way, a more introspective as well as a more expansive endeavor, I no longer worried about my gender. It was never a focus in the school. I don't think there was any kind of value judgment on gender, despite the bodies being different, and therefore formations and relationships in the composition of dance would be different. It was never a factor in value judgment. I don't think, certainly. That wasn't how I experienced it. And certainly by the time I was studying dance at tertiary level, all dancers were treated equally, despite, recognizing differences does not mean that you valued them differently. So that's been my experience. And I think the added bonus of the Indian classical art forms is that you are trained the same. There is no separate training for male and female dancers, particularly in the solo formats. So again, the material that's given to you is gender neutral, and there is no, the only inflection that you need to think, gender inflection that you need to think about is how to portray particular characters. So the acting body is neutral. And then you may take on various characters. You may be, but it surpasses gender. Gender is irrelevant in that case, because you can take on many characters. You're going across ages. You're going across different emotional arcs. So then gender is just another one of those factors which you can traverse without it needing to be a huge factor. As far as the industry is concerned, yes, admittedly, there are more women dancers than men dancers. But I don't think it, in this day and age, certainly, and certainly in my experience over the last couple of decades, it's not been an issue at all. Like you say, there are many successful male dancers. That boils down purely to their artistry more than anything else, in my opinion. Um, so it's never been an issue for me. Certainly in my experience, I obviously also I've lived outside of a lot of the cultural hubs of Indian dance. I grew up in Malaysia, I moved to Australia, I lived in Europe and so on. So the context, the cultural context of Indian dance within which the dance grows and develops. I've grown slightly adjacent to that, not right in the middle of it. So certainly my experience will be different to a dancer who, say, for example, lives in Bangalore or Chennai or Delhi or somewhere like that. But I do think, certainly from what I've heard, that their attitudes are shifting, that the onus on breadwinning that's often on the shoulders of male dancers, who might be homemakers, family members. I think it's shifting. This idea that dance can be a serious pursuit, an artistic as well as a career pursuit, is definitely more widely accepted now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, your insights. And yeah, it if I recall, you do travel to India to train,
Yes. Yes.
which I found amazing because you've grown up in different places, but you end up going to India to learn and fine tune your art. And it's very interesting to me that you're so humble. You're a professional dancer, but you still choose to go and train, right? You're still training. So
Right. In that sense, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, because it's there, like you say, because there aren't any concrete borders and it's all quite subjective, it's so expansive. There's no limit to the amount of knowledge that is being generated, but by the gurus of the past, the gurus now, and also certainly your own imagination and your own interests. And so to work with like-minded individuals, as well as to be in touch with the gurus who live these art forms day in, day out, one has to go to the source, or rather, like the cultural hubs where these things happen, and where else but the subcontinent. So yes,
great.
hence retracing of the steps.
Yeah. So, you have some amazing pictures of your performances, and I'd request our audience to go and check those out on your Instagram account. We'll add the link in the description. There's one picture in particular that it seems like you're suspended in air. I thought that was a remarkable picture. Can you give us a little bit information in terms of what was that performance all about and who took that picture?
I think if I know the picture that you're referring to, that was just a photo shoot. It wasn't related to any performance. It was a photo shoot from 2009 by a photographer named James Markland, and he had worked. So I was working with a company and he had come to do a photo shoot for the company for a particular production. And then he said, hey, would you be interested in just, doing a few shots? So just to kind of build his portfolio and mine. So we went to the studio. I took a bunch of different clothes with me and just tried different things. That's really all that happened. It was an experiment. And that particular photo, in fact, all of them, I think all credit goes to the photographer, because it's easy enough to move through space. It's what I do day in and out. But to capture the particular moment and to kind of, the compositional element is entirely up to the photographer. And hats off to those wonderful individuals who are able to capture these movements. Really, all it was that I was jumping through space, and I had to do it about 20, 30 times until we found the one that worked for us both. But that's what it was. Yes.
Yeah, it's an amazing shot. So, apart from many others, actually.
Thank you.
The We've got to conclude this soon, so let's just talk a little bit about you're in Belgium and what is the scene like in terms of how you and your dance form is received.
Belgium is Belgium has had a thriving dance scene, a contemporary dance scene since the late 70s, early 80s. And so on in that field of contemporary dance, it's quite well known. As far as traditional Indian dance is concerned, it's lesser known. Traditional Indian dance is less known in Belgium. I imagine that's primarily due to the fact that there is no kind of historical connection between Belgium and India. Whereas in the UK, for example, when I lived in London, there's a larger diaspora. There's certainly links from colonial past. So you can imagine that there are already cultural ties between those two places. But there isn't that in Belgium. There are a handful of artists who teach. And as far as performance is concerned, it certainly is a smaller marketplace for Indian dance than, say, the UK. But it's really interesting working here because the space to just be an individual is there. You can certainly allow yourself to shed any let's call them cultural assumptions that people might place on you is less than say somewhere else. Or put it this way, the opportunities to challenge those assumptions are there. So it's not that, it's all hunky-dory and everybody's all wonderful all the time. There's certainly, there are boundaries within which people work and they expect certain things when they see a person of a certain complexion and of a certain heritage. They think, oh, they assume that this is what you're going to bring to the table. But the space to challenge all those assumptions is also there. So there's a kind of freedom to be yourself and navigate the world as you wish rather than having to follow formulas, so to speak. So it's a fertile space for art, for dance. It sometimes can be a little lonely when you're working in a medium that is slightly alien to this ground. But there is opportunity there for individuals to thrive, to sort of express individualism. So for that reason, I'm actually quite thankful to be here.
Awesome. So you do perform all over the world. So tell us that. So what's your lineup and what are you thinking of in the near future?
Oh gosh, I don't know about all over the world. Certainly making more trips back to India. Currently, I'm doing training with the Vijayani Satpathy. She is an Odissi performer, teacher, choreographer based in Bangalore. She used to be a part of the Nrityagram ensemble in Bangalore. And so I train with her online. And in fact, next week I'm traveling to Bangalore to train with her for a couple of weeks. And following this, I start in September. I start work with a Dutch company that uses Indian classical dance as one of its inspirations, which is run by the choreographer Kalpana Raghuraman. So I start working with her on a new project. I've got ideas for a new project for the following year, but that all involves planning and funding application writing, and so lots of office work to be done, as well as ideas to kind of think about and allow to brew before they kind of take any kind of creative shape. So that's what's in the pipeline at the moment.
Sounds like a lot of effort, and I hope you're going to be able to find time to come back and share all the updates on our channel. And we'll conclude our interview here. I do
Thank
wish you
you.
the best on behalf
Thank
of
you
the
so much.
audience. So hope to see you back again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Namaskar.